All right, Brian, can you hear me? Because everything looks like it's working on this end, and if you can't hear me now, I don't know what the hell is going on. So just hit me up in the comments there. Yeah, we're good? All right, thank God. All right, if this does go out at any point, Brian, I'm going to ask you to just let me know, shoot me a message or something, and I'll just reset the browser here. Let's see. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Well, sometimes in the midst of certain adversity, you have to just sit back and laugh, right? Father Bob is his internet has gone out, and I'm going to hang about, and hopefully that comes back on. Let me just get back to him very quickly and let him know. If it comes back around, let me know. All right. So as I was saying a moment ago when nobody could hear a damn thing I was saying, I just wanted to talk a little bit about what I've been doing over here on this end of Dark Hour, what we're planning on working towards moving forward throughout this year. A lot of exciting things have been happening. And one of the reasons I dialed back on the interviews was to focus on some of these more peripheral projects that I have been involved in. Number one, I think there's at least 3 conferences that I've been invited to be a part of this year, either through the filming and documentation of those participants, or to speak myself, or just be another ancillary piece within the work to get these things up and running. So a lot of people have reached out to me, and I'm very grateful for that opportunity. And honestly, I can't wait to do this. I'm not going to talk about specifics because I don't know how much is mentioned yet, but let's just put it this way: in the next month or so, I'll have more details on that, and I can share those going forward. And for those of you who are interested, I will have details on how you can join these conferences as well. So it should be no surprise that I have been working hard on a new Montauk documentary, very much along side of Brian Minnick, who's also been a fantastic help. I mean, we've been bouncing back and forth through some of the different things that we're finding, and a lot of what I've offered is modern examples of certain technology that was mentioned being used in not only the Montauk project, but other subsequent projects that may or may not have been related. And Brian has really been on the forefront with boots on the ground, talking to people and making certain connections with folks who are not necessarily publicly associated with Montauk or any of these projects, but still have their experiences, and they're coming forward. So within this compilation of different people that we're talking to, let's put it that way, it will be a very different type of documentary. And I wanted to talk to some of those folks who, again, were not necessarily aligned with any sort of association within Montauk, but were there for the times that this purportedly happened. And I'm going to tell you right now, the majority of those people, aside from a couple few naysayers, and I mean that's a very small number, believe it or not, acknowledge that there was something happening at that base, and that they either themselves were involved to some degree, they knew somebody that was involved, whether it's a family member or a friend, or they had heard different things through the grapevine about what was happening there. So this was public knowledge, or at least something that the Air Force couldn't keep completely under wraps at the time. Now, there were some people who knew what was happening, but others had no idea. And I mean, that's just the nature of this type of thing. I see a couple of you filing in there. Hey, Aussie Tiger, what's going on? Good to see you, mate. Giro Sounds. How you doing, brother? Sister, whoever you are. Sorry, I don't see. Never mind. Anyway, Puck Elf, what's up, buddy? Been a while since I've seen you around. Of course, Montauk is strange here, keeping the chat in check. Yeah, thank you guys for coming along. It doesn't look at this point like Father Bob is going to be able to join us this evening. Now, let me tell you a couple things very quickly about that last interview I did with Father Bob. Okay, so we were getting into the thick and thin of certain discussion, and if you haven't seen it, about halfway through the show, my microphone began to cut out, and it was a very slow waning, sort of a petering out, fizzling at the very end, and I had no sound. Okay. At that time, as I realized it, I said, okay, took that microphone out and disengaged it, and then put in my backup, because I have 2 of them on the computer in case something stupid like this happens. Well, neither of those worked either. Hold on. You gotta give me a second here. I'm going to give Father Bob on the phone. Father Bob, what's going on, buddy? You are on the air at the moment, but were you able to get your internet up and running?
No, the thing is, it just started going haywire when it was on all this time until it was time for the show.
You know, this is how these things work sometimes. How uncanny.
Yeah, how uncanny. It just keeps going around and around. It says it's working, you know, it's got all the bars, but then at the same time it says it's not working.
That's weird, buddy. I mean, I wish I could offer some help on that end, but you're a little bit further than a walking's distance, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I mean, it has the check for there, but for some reason it's not working.
Well, look, that's okay. What I'm going to do here, I mean, if that comes on in like the next 20 minutes and it seems to work out, just come on into the studio or just shoot me a message. I'm just talking to people out in the chat at the moment. And I'm going to go over a little bit of what we did previously. So if things change on your end, just let me know and we'll go forward. Otherwise, you and I will talk, okay?
All right, we'll do.
All right. Thank you, Father.
Yeah.
All right. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. All right. So back to what happened last time. All right. So the audio gives out. And, you know, again, I have backups. They don't work either. Now, I'm really confused because that's never been the case. Yes, I've had technical difficulties. Everybody who's been to this show over the past 4 or 5 years knows that I've struggled with that to some degree, with, in most cases, a certain resolve that I was able to put together and didn't disrupt the show all that much. That being said, my hands were tied at this point. So I very, very reluctantly ended the show, and I got off, you know, the computer, and I immediately gave Father Bob a call. And the second we get on the phone and I'm trying to explain what had happened, I turn around and I see my headphones that are sitting on my desk next to my computer fly right across the room. Very strange. You know, thankfully I'm a little familiar with this type of activity, but, you know, a lot of people sit and say, oh, there's something going on technologically. Oh, it's got to be the FBI. It's got to be the CIA. It's some extraterrestrial influence. It's the paranormal influencing it. Yes, in some cases, that may be exactly what's happening. And even though I've said this a little tongue-in-cheek at times, I know that there's only a bit of truth to that in certain ways. This time was a whole lot different. A whole lot different. And, you know, I did feel a presence in here for a very short period. It was sort of a heavy... It was a heavy feeling that was in the air, but all the time when I'm in contact with spirit, I get those waves of like frisson, you know, throughout the body, and, you know, all the hair stands up and so forth. It's a very familiar affect that we go through when we come into something anomalous like that. But for me, it's always kind of the first thing I start feeling before the other feelings or emotions, whatever comes with that, flood in. So I thought that was very interesting. And then tonight, here we are 1 week later, to the minute. And yeah, this is the weirdest thing. Apparently, my audio's not doing what it's supposed to either. I mean, the weirdest thing about this is that everything is where it should be. The levels are where they're supposed to be. as far as I can tell, electronically, everything's exactly where it needs to be. And yet I'm experiencing this. This cannot happen next week when I have Dr. Jonathan Reed on again. So I really have to figure something out here. If that means I have to find another place to hold the studio for that evening, I'll do it. But yeah, I can't do that. Everybody can hear me? Yes? So let me know. Okay, so if you guys can hear me, I hope you can. I'd certainly like to answer any questions you may have for me. And you know, maybe you don't have any. I don't know. There are people who email me all the time and have specific questions that may have been on their mind, whether it has to do with their own experiences, what I've done, you know, and so forth. You know, I'd like to open up that chat now for anyone who'd like to, you know, ask any question that you have. Okay. But in going into, again, what this year is going to hold, I'm working with Long Island Bigfoot, Michael, on a Bigfoot documentary, and it's really a highlight of that right brain perception of cryptids in general, and the whole field and how things are put together from not just Michael's point of view. I do have a couple others that I'm speaking to, but they're all very similar. And I kind of wanted to capture that in a way that wasn't as scientific in terms of the evidence, because believe me, there's a lot of it out there, and so many people have reported that on that already. There may be some bits and pieces that I include as supporting pieces, but outside of that, this is going to be a pretty anecdotal sort of walk into the woods, if you will. But at the same time, you're going to see us on location and doing what they do best in terms of being with Bigfoot or Dogman or elementals. I mean, you name it. Mike has all of those under his belt. So there are others that, you know, exactly the same. You know, I have to tell you that one video that he put out with the raccoon following him around the woods there. I know a lot of people were very concerned the raccoon may have had rabies or was sick or something along those lines, but it didn't necessarily exhibit the signs that we would normally see or symptoms when it came to a type of illness. I don't know. I mean, Mike's a very special dude. He's got a particular type of energy that, you know, when you walk into the woods with him, it's amplified. You can feel that with this individual. You know, that being said, you know, I'll probably have, well, I'm hoping to have that done by the end of the summer, if not probably early fall, I would say. But certainly that's one that will be completed this year. And depending on how the trip down to Montauk goes this summer, I should have what I need to finish that documentary. And if not, I think there will only be a few peripheral things that need to come together in order to complete it. So certainly keep your minds, keep your eyes open. Yeah, keep your minds open too, I guess, right? Considering what we're going to be talking about. So yeah, that's really what we've been doing over here. And again, why I've been so absent in respect of the interviews, or to the interviews, I should say. You know, I'm still working with Third Phase of Moon behind the scenes. I'm still working with Rich Giordano from GoofOn behind the scenes. I'm working with Dr. J. I'm working with Doc Skinner. I mean, you name it. I'm working with a lot of different people on many different facets of projects that a lot of them have spearheaded themselves. And, you know, I'm doing certain things within position to help them one way or another, whether that be, you know, participate for a show on Third Phase, what they're going to throw up that night, or have more of a planning in terms of, again, these conferences that are coming up soon. So, you know, I will be on the road at some point this year, and I will let all of you know where I'll be. I would love to see you come out and check out some of these conventions, because the rosters are out of this world in terms of who's going to be at certain dates and so forth. But again, that is something that I will expound upon as we go forward. Let's see. Anybody got any questions here in the chat? Yeah, near-death experiences too. Okay. I was at my day job the other day. I was at a restaurant. That's where I work. And I went up to this table to deliver some food. And as I put the food down, there was a couple, probably a little younger than me, I'd say, maybe in their late 30s. The guy noticed my rings. Now, I don't know if you'll be able to see some of these, but these, you know, these are some of the rings I have on my fingers. And, you know, he enjoyed what I was working with there. And, you know, he showed me some of his rings and then told me that he was a jeweler. I'm like, ah, cool. He's like, yeah, I got a place right up the street. That's another thing. He goes, you know, are you Wiccan or something? And, you know, his girlfriend was there, to her wife, whoever she was. And she was pretty much asking the same question. I'm like, no, I mean, I don't subscribe to any particular modality. I kind of derive a lot of my beliefs within my system from all over the place. So yeah, there are some elements of Wicca in my belief system, as well as, paganism. And I mean, you name it, we go right down the gamut. But this opened up a conversation, which occasionally does happen when I'm working with people in the public. And she revealed that she recently had a near-death experience, had some sort of tragedy befall her, went through that process. It was very enlightening for her in one way, shape, or form. Let's put it that way. And the gentleman was also talking about how interested he was in paranormal activity, ufology, and so forth. So I might get together with him and do some promotion for his jewelry. I did see some of it. It's unbelievably good. Yeah, gold and silver might be, a little pricey. I don't know what he's charging, but beautiful, beautiful artsmanship, and the crafting that this guy put into that, into all of his jewelry. It's unbelievable. It's a real talent that this guy has. So, my point in bringing this up is that you never know what kind of conversation you're going to have with people, or who's actually interested in what. I guess it's sort of a natural course. The people that I work with, somebody has a odd experience, or somebody knows someone who had an odd experience. They come to me to try and figure that out. And I'll, of course, give them as much guidance as I possibly can. But yeah, Montauk is strange. That eyeball ring. I mean, it's pretty cool, dude. I got that from somebody I used to work with, who was very close to me. I almost considered him a brother. And for some of those old timers to my channel, you may know who I'm talking about. A name is not needed to be mentioned. But that being said, we had a falling out, and he seemed a little more serious about it than I was. And sure enough, I haven't spoken to that individual in about 5 years now. But I knew him for about 15, almost 15, like 13, 14 years. Regardless, I like the ring. Let's see here. What else can we talk about? I mean, there's been so much going on. I have an experience that I'm sitting here holding back because I need to have Dr. Jonathan Reed on to kind of talk with me about this experience. But the only thing I'm going to say is that he did mention after the last show that I did with him that, in the past, when he's been interviewed, there have been interviewers that come back and tell him that extraterrestrial, Freddy, that he's named, has come to visit them. So he gave me a warning. He said he might visit you. And I said, yeah, okay, cool. All right, sure. It's a possibility. Anything's possible, right? I had a weird experience, and I got to talk to him before I can really express this publicly, and see if there's a parallel here in respect to what he was mentioning versus what I experienced, because what I went through, I've never seen before in my life. It was completely unexpected, caught me off guard. And it seems that I was in two different realities at the same time, doing one task with somebody else, and yet at the same time doing something else with these other entities, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me in a linear sense. But within that, again, I got to come back to these ideas of different timelines, or timeline jumping, or just the facets that we have as spiritual beings or energetic beings, where we are divided amongst different states of consciousness. And, when you look at yourself there, you're seeing just one small sliver of who you really, truly are. So maybe there's something along those lines. I mean, the secret space people are always talking about this. Obviously, Montauk spoke of it. There were other projects, including Looking Glass, that spoke about it. And yet at the same time, you look at Preston Nichols, who was very convinced that he was working in the Montauk Project while working at Brookhaven National Labs simultaneously. And again, this is a tough one for us to kind of figure out, because if we're really that close to that type of reality, there's something to be said there that we just have not figured out. But it's there at our doorstep. And perhaps in some years, we'll have more insight on that. But truthfully, we'll just have to see. Yeah. Again, I appreciate you guys being here tonight. I didn't mean for this to turn into a dissertation of any type, really. I'm going to have Father Bob back on, and I might pre-record the damn thing, okay? Because if this is what's happening, let's just pre-record it, and we'll do a premiere. But I'll talk to him and see how he feels about that idea. I'm sure he'll be okay. Look at that. Look at this. We have Father Bob Bailey in the building. Oh, for those of you who haven't left, thank you. We're right on track where we need to be. And again, if my sound goes out, guys, let me know. I'll just flip off, come back on, and we'll go from there. In the meantime, we have, let's see, what time is it? Another half hour or so, 35 minutes. And we're gonna spend every second of that with Father Bob Bailey. And with that being said, Father Bob Bailey, thank you so much, man, for being here with us again tonight. I'm sorry you went through the difficulties over there on that end, but hey, man, we're not unfamiliar with that over here.
Oh yeah, I don't know what I did. I just went to the road, unplugged, plugged, and then played around, and then it came back on.
Hey, look, if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. I'm asking no more questions beyond that. You know what I mean?
Okay, shoot your
So,
questions.
so I mean, I have kind of looked over the last interview that we did. I have a sense of what we covered. I don't think we really went into certain detail with some of the cases that you've been working on throughout the years. So for example, I'd love to ask you right off the bat. Obviously, we know that you were involved with the Warrens, okay? And I don't recall if you had mentioned this on that show or we had talked about this in or behind closed doors. But how did you really get involved with the Warrens, and what were your impressions of them as individuals and professionals in the field when you first got to know them?
Okay, well, I really didn't get to know Ed very much. When I was in
Mm-hmm.
the seminary in Maryland, my classmate that I used to drive from Connecticut with his parents were friends with the Warrens. They lived right, not far from each other. So he knew I was interested in the paranormal. So he said, "Hey, you want to go to a lecture?" So I did, and that's how I met Ed. But sadly, that was the only time. I didn't get to reconnect with Lorraine until Paranormal State, working with her on cases on Paranormal State, and then we became quite close quite fast. She took a shining to me, I took a shining to her. She was like my godmother. you know oh I would say grandmother, godmother.
Well, well, the same difference in a
And
sense.
yeah, I the only time I worked with her would be on cases for Paranormal State.
Now, I mean, you've been involved in television, time and time over, and a lot of us who have had that opportunity, we have certain reservations when it comes to television versus what the
Yeah.
reality is and what people think the reality is. Um, can you give me a little bit of your thought on, television taking the paranormal field and turning it into what seems to be more entertainment? I've spoken to, people from Ghost Hunters camp who very much solidified that a lot of this was contrived and they had to do it in the sense that they thought if they didn't get anything, there's nothing compelling about the investigation. I would probably argue that in terms of whatever location you're in, but regardless, I mean, I guess I understand where they come from, but what were your experiences like, and what are your thoughts about television taking up the paranormal field the way they have?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yeah, and I have my own criticisms about TV things. Uh, and one of the things that it can't help but do, but you only have like an hour of a show. So a lot of these cases were in the span of days or a week,
Mm-hmm.
and they splice them all together, and it seems that things are just like done within an hour, and it's not true, but they had to for the sake of the show. Now, in Paranormal State, there was sometimes that tension between wanting to get, of course, producers wanted to produce, but in reality, that doesn't always happen. I gotta say, Ryan Buell, what his integrity, he was totally client oriented. And as far as I know, while I was involved in the cases, I was only called in for the dark cases. There was nothing contrived. There was a couple of times where they wanted, production maybe wanted to go down one road, and Ryan's goes, "No, you do that, I'm
Good.
walking out." You know, so I can honestly say with Paranormal State, no, they didn't. They didn't. The only thing that we did was we had to uh, film and refilm the introductions. So,
Okay, yeah,
I
that's
had to be
natural.
introduced, even though I'd met them before, but that was But as far as the evidence, no, they didn't. Even the one I just did on Expedition X, it was at a friend of mine's house that I did the deliverance. And so, I mean, none of that was contrived. I don't know what happened. That took almost a week. They were at the house, but to my knowledge, nothing was contrived with that. However, you know, the, there are shows out there that do that. But I would
Mm.
never want to be a part of anything like that because the reason why I agreed to go in with Ryan because there were cases that I knew that I had, the expertise and to help in that area. So,
Well, I do believe
but
that there are productions that are real.
oh yeah, oh yeah, and I even think, I want to put a shout out. I mean, I watched Project Fear. That's probably the only one besides now Expedition X, because I get to know the two stars there. But I don't think a lot of that stuff is contrived on Project X. I may not always agree. I love them. I would love to meet them. That's a dream of mine.
Hmm.
But some of the things they do are kind of smack them in the head, especially when they're dealing with the demonic. It's like, what are you doing?
Oh,
Don't
geez.
call them on. Don't talk to them in your own name. But
Well, they're not provoking or anything, are they? What are they doing?
no, they're not provoking, but they're trying to establish. Are you the dark entity? You the, it's like, be careful. Be careful. You just don't know what it has the potential of. If it's a real demonic spirit, it's an angelic spirit. The demonic spirit is an angelic spirit, and you're no match for that.
Well, I mean, I think I've found that out firsthand at least a couple times.
Yeah,
Uh,
we all have, I think.
you know, but it's curious because we often talk about these different categories of entities, and that it's vast, and different uh, different systems hold different ideas of what these are and what they call them and so forth. I was aware of non-human entities and that they had no incarnation in a human life, and that when we find those particular energies here, chances are they're not supposed to be, and there was maybe something in the way of an intentional uprising to bring this thing about. People do
Hmm.
these things, don't know how to put them back. But even in my
Hmm.
case, I came across something I considered to be a watcher spirit, and as it would act one way, I understood at some point later that it was more of a guardian for that location that I had previously been in. Now, the curious thing about this, with a little more research, um, it actually had nothing to do with that location. It was almost like it had been assigned to be there. And again, no leverage in what this place was or what had happened there to it personally, but it had been put there with a specific task in mind. Do you come across anything like that would fit that description that I call a watcher spirit?
No, I'm very fascinated with the whole idea of watchers,
Hmm.
because to my knowledge, they could either be good or bad.
That's right.
So yeah, so I don't know enough. Uh, I know the Watcher. I've had experience with Watchers being angelic spirits that are like guardians, but I don't know much about the negative. You know, so I'm trying to learn more about that. Like I said, it's not an area that I'm expert in with the Watchers, except that there's an old song that we sing like on the feast of the angels, ye God, ye ye watchers and ye holy ones.
Hmm.
Okay, so that watcher in that sense would be an angel, and so maybe you can help in like what is the negative watcher? Is it?
Again, I think this is sort of a chameleon effect, wherein if you bring in some sort of energy that I wouldn't necessarily say threatens it, but for something to be concerned that you're there, it can perceive you as some sort of threat to the area. Maybe with the kids that I was with, which was a larger group that day than I would normally ever go with, they were a little uncontrolled and kind
Mhm.
of goofing off here and there. There was not a serious error about what they were doing, and yet on the other side, there were 3 or 4 of us that were very serious about what we were doing at that point. So maybe the mixing of energies threw off whatever this energy was that was a watcher spirit, And yet it doesn't really explain why it may have come after me outside of the fact that I'm incredibly sensitive to this sort of thing. Maybe it had a message. I mean, and I was just going into fear because of the effect that energy was having on my life and me personally. So, again, as I've told this story before, it started off as something very negative, and it pretty much mirrored that non-human entity that I had come across sometime prior, but it wasn't as intense. Different kinds of affects that would happen, again, as I've mentioned, pulling my hair while I'm trying to sleep, whispering my birth name right in my ear as I'm just about to fall asleep, seeing the shadows move back and forth in front of the VCR at the time, in the bedroom, the bed itself shaking violently, wherein apparently only I could feel it, and my girlfriend at the time wouldn't even wake up to entertain that this was happening, so she didn't feel any of
I
that
just had that
somehow.
experience with somebody.
Tell
I
me
just
about
had that
that.
experience with somebody. Yeah, she had called me and said it's a house I've been working on from the 1700s, and they would get activity. I would go there, cleanse it, and it would be fine. Then it would come back again. Well, this particular spirit, my friend was in bed. Her husband was there. He could chop wood with his sleep. He's such a dead sleeper.
Mm-hmm.
But she said that the bed shook up and down, not back and forth, but up and down, so much so that the cat, jumped in her arms.
So the
You
cat
know,
felt it too. All right.
uh, yeah. So there was some kind of other, you know, something to show that it was true. So what it is, I don't know. We're still, I haven't gone there yet. We're still trying to get a handle on. Okay, now what do they want? you know.
Well, I mean, you speak about deliverance. Can you walk us through that process a little bit? How do you shoot a house when you walk in there to know what you're dealing with versus what you might use in terms of technique, or does that not vary?
The technique doesn't vary too much. Um, I use a ritual that I've put together over the years, from different prayers and other things that I've written myself, too,
Mm-hmm.
prayers I've written myself. And yeah, so when I go in, if there's an investigation and they've deemed it something dark, then I will go in and I will bless the house. But more than just a house blessing, in the Catholic tradition, house blessings were common. When you have a new house, you go in, you bless it, and it's kind of like maybe in the Native American thing of saging, kind of in that you're
Okay.
just asking for a blessing on the house. But mine is a little bit more. Mine would be what we call a exorcism over place.
Mm.
So
Okay.
after preparing myself and the and whoever's there protection before we begin, then I set up a little altar, light a blessed candle, and then I begin the prayers, and the prayers are prayers of banishment. Then after I do the general prayers, I have blessed incense, frankincense and myrrh, and holy water. And I would go into the individual rooms, and I also have a relic of the true cross. And I would bless the home with that. And also, if I'm fortunate enough to have a couple of people with me, then I'll say, okay, you take the holy water, you take the incense for the fumigation. I'll take the true cross, and go into each room, and then I try to shut any portals also. And then at the end of that, if I feel that there might be human spirits for whatever reason that are there, I will try to ask St. Michael to lead them into the light of the Lord's presence. And then the final thing to do is once you've banished is to go outside, and I do a prayer of a hedge of protection. I have four exorcised medals of St. Benedict usually, and then I have them buried in the four corners of the property and sprinkle salt around the,
Okay.
the property. And so that once they've left, they won't come back.
That's quite involved,
And
and
that's
yet seems. Yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, it is. It is. It's a lengthy process, but the people are grateful because they know I'm not just, you know, in there and screaming out. I'm
Of
giving them,
course.
their due, and And so I think it makes them feel even better that I'm taking my time and doing all of that, you know?
Well, yes, you're putting attention to it. You're doing the due diligence that would be expected of something so sensitive, because this is obviously something that's not welcome as a presence with these people that live in these houses, and in
Right,
many cases they're experiencing some sort of turmoil or struggle with that energy as
right.
well. I mean, there's a lot of power play that goes into this, and we could talk about that. But how often do you come across a larger overarching energy, which may be appearing to be negative in one way, shape, or form, and then realizing that there are perhaps human entities or human souls, spirits in this house being overshadowed or even
Mhm.
controlled or locked into a specific place with that overarching enemy. How often do you come across something like that?
Um, I've come across it. I mean, not often, because sometimes, when I go to a place, I'll say, okay, there's a human explanation, a rational explanation for what's going on, you know, and hopefully the homeowners are like, oh, thank God,
Hmm.
Um, not everyone feels that way. It's like, no, it's a demonic spirit. It's like, well, no, it's you need to upgrade your appliances because
Hmm.
they're sending off this stuff. So but yes, I have in certain places. So my what I've come to experience to see is that the demonic, the negative presence will be holding these people, these souls captive for whatever reason. And so what I need to do first is I either try to cross the souls, pray for them to go where they belong, and then go after the demon, or go after the demon first and then release the souls. And so it depends on the dynamic of what's going on. But yeah, I have run into it. Not all, I wouldn't say it's commonplace, but it has happened a number of times when I've gone, you know.
Um, what was I going to ask you? Oh, okay. So, how do you think, in your experience, some of these bigger energies that are negative are holding these other ones there? In our mind, we think of something more in the way of a brute force or something like that. But we also understand,
Yeah.
especially on the other side, we're even more aware of the fact that we have a certain free will. And I wonder if maybe, some of those people aren't crossing over by choice, but somehow this other oppressive force is in the mix. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's another possibility, and that's another experience I've had. That there are earthbound spirits. I don't understand totally. It's an anomaly,
Hmm.
um, but for whatever reason, and you hit it on the head with free will. Um, I try to think long and hard, and again, it's like, well, we're given free will. The angels are given free will. The angels have that all the time. So when we die, does the free will do we have that going into the next world? And my surmising is, yeah, we don't lose the free will. So if there was someone for whatever reason, the soul say, I'm not ready, I don't want to go, would God honor that? Perhaps, and that could be a reason why. So, and then that's when I would try to address the spirit and pray for the spirits to go, and then ask. Um, I have a saint and the archangel Michael that I ask to help me to, convince these souls to go to peace, to go to the light, to go where they belong. Now, some may already be now, and I happen to also believe, and as Catholics, we believe in the communion of saints. So there are souls who have already gone to God. And because when you're not in your corporeal body, you're not bound to time or space. So could you be in heaven and be on earth at the same time? Well, yeah, the angels are, you know, in our Catholic tradition, we have apparitions, let's say the Virgin Mary or the Lord, and they're appearing to humans on earth, and yet they're also in heaven. So um, yeah, so with those, I don't worry about them because they're like
Hmm.
guardians, especially when someone, a loved one dies, sometimes we experience, they let us know they're okay or they're present, and that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I mean, when we address something from the etheric, you know what I mean, we can only surmise to a certain extent what might be there for all of us, and
Mhm.
what limitations may be imposed, whether that's of our own volition or if there's something external that happens there. But what about physical boundaries and barriers? So, for example, as much of a not a fan I am of Zach Bagans, I mean, he did propose this idea that spirits couldn't cross over large bodies of water. Or in your case, you use salt as a protective measure. So this is a physical object or material that seems to, I mean, I could guess that obviously this has something to do with vibration. I don't know about water. But, what are your thoughts on the physical barriers that we may be able to enable for, these type of experiences and with spirits that seem to be stuck in a place. And again, going back to that idea that they can't cross over water, well, why do you think that is? Why would something physical affect them on the other side?
Yeah, I don't know about water. I've never heard of that before. Certainly, there's a belief in elemental spirits, and some come from the water, you know.
Hmm.
Um, but I think the reason why the salt and the metals work is because they're blessed with a specific purpose to keep them at bay, to
The
form a
intention.
hedge.
Okay.
The
Okay.
hedging, yes, absolutely.
Hmm.
And the attention is it's not the salt so much in the metals as the angels and God who forms that and doesn't permit it, you know.
Right. Right. So again, you talk about intention, and a lot of what we experience, I think, goes along that line. And it's a tool that we have at our disposal, maybe in the same way that we have intuition or clairvoyance or anything that falls under that umbrella. Um, and yet, it seems that intention is really the driving motivator behind what people do, right? I mean, that sort of goes within
Hmm.
the definition, but it's no different from the spirit's perspective as well, or at least the spirit world, the way we view it. Um, Power objects, certainly must be imbued with some sort of intention. And it's not the object itself, it's what's laid into it
Hmm.
in terms of that
Right,
overprojection. Um,
right.
why do you think, or at least in your experiences, let me put it that way, through the cases that you've been involved in, why do you think some spirits, in no negative space whatsoever, maybe still linger about the same home that they've lived in while they were here? Or just don't seem to have a desire to move forward. Why do you think someone would choose to stay in that state? And at the same time, what do you think that might look like?
Yeah. Well, two things. One, as I said before, they've already crossed over, but they're just kind of like, well, guardian because of the loved ones that are there.
Mm,
And again, the connection we have with those who have gone before us, that we call the communion of saints. But as far as the others, it could be unprovided death, a sudden death. They're just caught in between. I don't fully understand it. And it could be fear,
hmm.
unfinished business. Those could be some of the feeling not worthy, feeling afraid, that they're going to be punished. It could be those reasons that they don't go. You know, um, and there have been stories of like little children looking for their parents, which is very sad.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I don't understand that, except that there's a lot we don't know. I mean, the norm is you pass in our tradition, our belief system, you go to your reward. And for us as Catholic Christians, it's heaven, hell, or purgatory. But you know, uh, but there's so much other things that we may not realize. And so
Let
even
me
in
throw you a
Jesus's
curveball
day, I'm
here.
reading the gospel.
Yeah, go ahead.
What's that?
No, go ahead.
Well, even in Jesus's day, when the disciples said, "We thought you were a ghost," and he said, "No. Notice that a ghost does not have flesh and blood like I do." Okay, he didn't say, "Oh, by the way, there's no such thing as ghosts."
Well, that is true.
In a few places in the gospel, he proved to them that he wasn't a ghost.
Hmm.
And I mean, in my opinion is that that would have been a teachable moment. He always used everything as a teachable moment, whether it be examples, things happen, and he didn't. So,
So
one could.
here's the curveball I'm going to throw at you. Okay, and this sort of plays on your belief system and so forth, right? So this is a question that has come up many different ways for many different people and so forth. If Jesus is our Lord and Savior, okay, so to say,
Mhm.
and we have the Holy Trinity, and we have description of this, and we have identification with it. Where would extraterrestrials or some sort of terrestrial conscious enlightened being sort of fit within that modality?
Yeah, that's a good. There's differing opinions. There's some who would say that all aliens are not really aliens. They're demonic.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily hold to that, although I think sometimes it is that they visit and they mask. Um, for others, I don't know. We believe that Christ is the Lord of the universe and universal salvation. And who's to know in another realm, another universe, what was going on there with the God who created it? So, things are possible. We just don't understand that we don't understand. And we have to say we bow to the mystery we don't know. Now, that's a more loose a belief of that. But again, some would say, no, 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 there's no such thing. So,
Well, I
but
appreciate that answer. It's not an easy question to tackle
no, it's
when
not. It's
you have
not.
a belief system behind that you have to build from in order to say yes or no.
Yeah, we
Um,
don't have a
yeah.
teaching on, there's no doctrine on aliens for or against.
As far as I've ever known, I think that's accurate. I mean, you would obviously know
Yeah.
much better than I, but nonetheless, there are thoughts or statements that have said or brought about the idea that maybe within these scriptures certain things had been removed. Now, obviously, we know that that's the case. Dealing with certain things, but extraterrestrials were always brought into this because of the whole creation story that went beyond the Catholic or Christian belief system in terms of the 6 days and so forth, whatever. The Anunnaki, sorry, and
Mhm.
their involvement in our creation and so forth, and it's an interesting thing to get into, looking into those
Yeah.
scriptures, because I think that people have been able to verify to a verbal degree, right, a literary degree, that stuff is there. So again, something to perhaps further research, but these things are always within my mind and certainly fit within our wheelhouse. uh
Yeah. I mean, it's not part, like the Book of Enoch and all. It's
yeah.
not necessarily a part of our belief system, but um, in some Jewish, esoteric, mysticism, it is. It is part of that. Some, we have some books that during the Protestant Reformation that they threw out,
Hmm.
um, wisdom book. But certainly the Nephilim, years ago, like I had never even heard of it. And I'd say, that's in the Bible? Yeah, look it up in the book of Genesis. Well, I've read the book of Genesis, I thought. So I go back and look at it and say, how did I miss this? You know?
Well, maybe it didn't stick out for you at the
Uh,
time. I mean, maybe you weren't
no,
in
no,
that
obviously
mindset.
it didn't.
Yeah.
Obviously it didn't. Um, so it's
Curious.
interesting. It's just interesting, there's a differing of beliefs and so
Well, I mean, one of the things that brings us together as a species is that we do have belief. It doesn't matter what you believe in, it's a global
mhm.
phenomenon. We all have something that we believe. This is a basic human trait that I don't know. I mean, we could go back into our own history as far as we could, and I'm sure we're going to find that in the earliest days of recorded history. So, it's only to be assumed that this is ingrained, something very innate within us, that we have to have that. And the psychology behind this obviously goes many different ways, and can be discussed, from here till we get to the moon. But
Mhm.
that being said, coming back to some of your cases, because we have just a little bit of time here, but there's three questions I want to ask you. Okay. The first is, what was a case, if there was one, that you felt impacted you the most in a personal way?
Hmm. I think that a case where I experienced a negative or what I feel is a demonic presence where I was living in a rectory. And it was when I was first getting involved with paranormal work. And it was without a doubt, I mean, several people experienced things, heard things, uh, and it was formidable. It didn't scare me, but it was an eye opener for me. It's because it hit home, you know. Um, for instance, I was down meeting with people with paranormal investigators. We're going to try and join forces, and we heard running upstairs, and they were saying, "What was that?" And I said, "There's nobody here but us. There's nobody in this rectory." So I said, "You know what? We're not going to feed into it until after our meeting." So, and we caught some evidence there, but so that was it. Another one that was stuck in my mind was one the only one that I would say fit the criterion of demonic possession. And I was called into Massachusetts and for a case. And when I was there with my assistant and his wife, who was our case manager, we decided to all go together because we weren't sure what we were walking into. And as we're driving, she has a big thing of iced tea, and she's going, "Oh my God, this smells like urine." And we're going, "What? Come on." So my friend grabs it, he smells it, and he goes, "Oh, it does." I'm saying, "Really?" So I took it and smelled it, and yeah, it smells like urine. So I said, "What in the heck are we in for?" When we got into the house, the woman, the young lady was there in a pool of urine. I tried for several hours to do a deliverance over her. It wasn't working. And finally, I realized she had superhuman strength. She was speaking language. I'm going like, "Oh, this is over my pay grade. I need to stop right now, and I need to contact somebody. I need to contact the bishop and have him send someone who is more had more experience as an exorcist." And so, thankfully, I knew the bishop, and he, he said, "Sure." And so he sent one, and but it was like I was exhausted because it was hours, and that always stuck in my mind as a formidable case. And I'm sure I'm missing some, but is your uh, oh no, don't tell me it's happening again.
Can you hear me now?
I
Oh,
can.
you're right. Yeah, maybe it's honestly, I'm starting to wonder if it's StreamYard or it's maybe the browser. I don't know because when I take it down, it comes back up. Anyway, what I was saying is it's a damn good thing that I can read lips because I can hear a word of what you just said, but I kind of got the gist of it. So I'll go back and listen to that answer. It looks so animated. I can't wait to actually hear what you said. But that being said, um, the next two questions I have, which we'll end on here, is sort of it's a twofold question, really. I'm curious to hear about the most positive case that you've ever come across where there was nothing demonic there. I mean, I know you work in a lot of the darker cases, but I would imagine in some stances you do come up against something more positive. What was that like? And then on the opposite side of things, what was the most
Technical difficulties. Please stand by.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Before anything else fucks off over here,
Okay.
Mike.
All right. Now you talked about positive that it
Yeah,
had an explanation to it.
yeah. So positive experience, the best positive experience you've had, working in this field, versus the most malevolent experience you've had in this field.
Okay. The positive one was I went to the house of this couple, beautiful couple,
Mm-hmm.
Portuguese couple. They were very devout Catholics. I mean, they had a chapel in
Mm,
their house. So they were saying that all these things were happening. But how can this be? You pray every day, you go to mass, you receive Holy Communion. What I don't understand. So as we did an investigation, the long and short was that they needed to upgrade some of their things like washers and stuff because they were emitting
okay.
things. And then with the man himself, he was going through a lot of guilt. And when he was feeling suicidal, he was saying it's a demonic thing, but it wasn't. So he ended up going and getting help, and they were relieved that it was an explanation. It doesn't
Okay.
always happen. They were relieved, and so it was a happy resolve with that. Um, as far as the most malevolent, um, there were so many different experiences, but um, I guess I would say that this house that I'm working on, that they have gone back several times. When it was a demonic thing,
Mm-hmm.
I was touched, and that kind of freaked me out.
Mm.
You know,
How were you touched on the cheek, on the shoulder? Were you pushed?
the
What,
feet, the feet,
the feet? Wow, that's weird.
yeah, and and I was threatened. So yeah, I would have to say that right now because there were other things, but nothing that's really like scared me. That's the one thing. God is good. It's like the malevolent spirits don't scare me. Now, I'm not saying I'm not. I have a healthy respect,
Mm-hmm.
but it just doesn't scare me. I mean, honestly, real people scare me more than spirits do.
Yeah, same here.
So yeah. So nothing that's really going. But um, when I'm not able to help somebody, that's really when it's the most formidable for me because they don't want to accept the help. And, mm, there is a couple of cases where they didn't want to let go,
Sure.
you know, they didn't want to let go of it. So, um, yeah.
Well,
And it
sometimes
was,
people find an identity in there somewhere. I mean, this is happening and it's happening to me. You know what I mean? And there's something significant there for them in that.
yeah. Oh, and the other thing I think that was scary for me is we did one of a grocery store. And and we found that down in the basement was where the portal was.
Mm-hmm.
And we were doing, and a couple of people got attacked. I did not, but one person who was an empath got really attacked. I pray over him, and another one got gouged in the hand. It was like a snake bite.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that was formidable,
Wow.
and that took quite a while. And then it came home and attached. It was oh, succubus.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be for a guy? Yeah, and it wasn't letting him go, and it followed it home, and it was my assistant, and so we had to deal with that. I mean, they heard like a banshee outside, and we got that on. Actually,
Hmm.
it's on The Haunted. The episode made it. It's called Demonic Seduction. If you go on YouTube, on The Haunted, it's called Demonic Seduction. I think that was the most formidable case that I had because it went to two places. It went from the the, uh, the convenience store, not grocery store, convenience store,
Hmm.
to my friend's house, following home, and it was a learning. And then when we were at home doing it, the guy who was a tech guy got scratched in the back. All of a sudden, he was like, "Ow!" And he took his shirt off. There were three markings on the back, three scratches, and it scared the heck out of him.
Rightfully so. I
Oh
think
yeah,
that something that you just said is really important for people to understand, and that is you have to have a healthy respect to what you're walking into. I think there's this impression that you enter an old abandoned house and you start calling out the spirits that might be
yeah,
there because you can't see them. You are not immediately aware of any sort of threat. It's only when they show up and you've experienced it in different ways that you realize, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done what I just did. I mean, in certain cases, yeah, the attacks become physical and people are
right.
harmed. I mean, I've woken up from a night's sleep and found scratch marks going.
Uh-oh.
Sorry. So what I was saying is, having this healthy respect of knowing what you're walking into. I mean, I've had scratch marks all the way down my arm. I've woken up this
Hmm.
way. I knew I didn't get up at all that evening. Uh, and it could only come from one thing at that time. And I was actually being plagued by something that was in the domicile that I had rented. Um, and that was a completely different experience that lasted the course of 2 years. But that being said, again, having a healthy respect, knowing that this is what you're walking into, again, go into a location, you don't immediately see it, doesn't seem like a threat. But when you start poking the bear, you might just find something completely different. And again, that's something that's very important for folks to understand because as much fun as this could be in the sense that it's revelatory and we can learn something, there's an education in the paranormal field, the way that we do it, we can also find the opposite end of things and people can get hurt. Thank God
Yeah.
it doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen enough that we have to discuss it. And again, have that healthy respect. Um,
Yeah, and I think those who have been in it for many years understand that. I'm
mhm,
not so sure a lot of the newer ones come up because there's a lot of groups that are there go from one experience to another, one haunted location to another. And it's
that's
like,
right.
are you there for the thrills or are you there to help clients? You know?
Well, that's the question we have to ask. And again, when television is in the mix, in many
Yeah.
cases, we have an answer. But again, like I said, there are productions that try to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And, I don't know how they end up, making that work unless they're actually in a location and spend the time because, we've talked about that. It's not just maybe an overnight, it's maybe a whole week's investigation.
Yeah. Oh
So,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah, that has to be taken into consideration as well. Um, Father Bob, I'm going to close the show out now just before anything else decides to befall us in terms of technology, but I want to thank you so much for coming back and being
Hey,
patient
does
with
this
me
just
and
happen
this
with
stuff.
me or does it happen other times?
Not like this. This has only happened with you this way.
Do 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 do.
Yeah. I mean, after those headphones flew off my desk, across the room when I was talking on the last show, yeah, I knew something might be afoot. I'm not sure
No,
what, but it is what it is. And like you said, we're not scared of it. It is what it is.
no.
So, yeah, once again, man, thank you
Yes.
for coming on. Where can we find you? Where can we look for you? I mean, is there some place you'd like to direct my audience so they can find out more about you?
Well, I do have a website. It's www.holyswordapostolate.com. I'm also on
Fantastic.
Facebook as Father Bob, and the Holy Sword Apostolate on Facebook.
And I'll put those links in the description, folks. You can go ahead and just click on that. It'll take you directly to the site and the Facebook page. I'm sure if you have any questions for Father Bob Bailey, feel free to reach out. I'm certain he would enjoy. Look at this little fly. Get out of here. I'm sure he would be more than happy to, engage in that conversation and answer whatever questions you have. This is what we do. This is what we're here for. We're in service to the public, as well as, furthering the advancement of, the research in the fields that we've undertaken. But that's just part of it. You have this relation that you have to keep when it comes to this, because essentially, whether it's, Father Bob Bailey out there in the field or it's myself, our intention is to help people. And that may come in many different forms given what it is, but that is what we're here doing. So with that being said, Father, I'm going to go ahead and take you off for a moment, just close out the show. Stick around for a minute if you would, and I'll be back in just a minute. Thank you so much, mate.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, we made it through. I really got to figure out what's going on over here. You've heard me say it enough times tonight, and even worse, you've seen it. So I'll figure that out, whatever that looks like. But, in the meantime, having a guest like Father Bob Bailey on is a real honor and a treat, because here's an individual who has been in this field for so many years and is very grounded and very knowledgeable in all different aspects of paranormal, and yet still sits at, a specific modality of belief, which I think is really interesting. And, we get into these fields and sometimes we develop belief systems based on what we experience there, but to have that foundation coming in, there's a right way to do things, there's a wrong way to do things. I find it fascinating. And certainly will continue to research that in my own time and how that methodology is actually enacted. But I want to thank all of you for your patience this evening and your attendance. I'm very happy that Father Bob Bailey was able to join us. Yes, it's about a half hour in, but together between the two interviews, it's a full interview, right? Maybe I'll just stitch them together at some point. But in the meantime, I'm going to put the timestamp down in the comments. And that way, anybody who's interested in watching this after the show is live, then you can go right to that and you will jump right into Father Bob Bailey's conversation with me. Once again, thank you so much. We will see you, if not sooner, definitely next Tuesday at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time with Dr. Jonathan Reed joining us once again. I do hope that you'll join us for that. It's going to be an explosive show. He says he has other things that he wants to talk about that are more progressive in the sense of recent activity involving at least his experiences, if not the case itself. So we will explore that at length. And once again, thank you so much for being here. My name is Michael Roser. This is Dark Hour Paranormal. Till next time, ciao. Where is it? There it is.